In the late 15th century, the small town of La Ferté-Bernard in northern France was plagued by a series of brutal attacks by a pack of wolves. These wolves, which became known for their ferocity and seemingly insatiable hunger, terrorized the countryside, killing livestock and humans alike. The wolves of La Ferté-Bernard struck fear into the hearts of the local population, becoming a haunting chapter in the region's history. This narrative explores the events surrounding the wolf attacks, the efforts to stop them, and the lasting impact these events had on the local community and French folklore.
La Ferté-Bernard, located in the region of Sarthe in northern France, was a quiet rural town in the 15th century, surrounded by dense forests and farmland. During this period, wolves were a common presence in many parts of Europe, especially in areas where human populations bordered large, wild forests. Wolves generally kept their distance from humans, focusing their predatory instincts on wild game and livestock. However, when winters were harsh, food became scarce, and human settlements offered easy prey, wolves sometimes turned to humans as a food source. The late 1400s were a time of hardship for many rural communities in France. War, famine, and disease left many areas vulnerable, and the boundaries between civilization and wilderness were often blurred. Wolves, facing a shortage of natural prey, began to venture closer to human settlements, where they could find livestock and other easy targets.
The first attacks by the wolves of La Ferté-Bernard were reported in the winter months when food sources for the wolves were particularly scarce. At first, the wolves attacked livestock, a relatively common occurrence, but soon, reports began to emerge of wolves preying on humans, particularly children and women who ventured out to tend to livestock or gather firewood. The wolves attacked with brutal efficiency, striking at night and often dragging their victims into the dense forests that surrounded the town. The bodies of the victims were found mauled and partially eaten. There remains a horrifying testament to the savagery of the attacks. The fear in La Ferté-Bernard grew quickly, with villagers too afraid to leave their homes after dark or venture into the forests alone. Local authorities and town leaders were at a loss for how to stop the attacks. Hunting wolves was a dangerous and often unsuccessful endeavor, as the animals were cunning and elusive. Several hunts were organized, but the wolves, familiar with the terrain, easily evaded capture, slipping into the shadows of the forests as soon as the hunters approached. The desperation of the villagers grew as the attacks continued. Many began to view the wolves not as mere animals but as agents of evil or supernatural forces. The belief in werewolves, humans cursed to take the form of wolves, was common in medieval Europe, and some villagers feared that these were not ordinary wolves but something far more sinister.
Over the course of several months, the wolves of La Ferté-Bernard claimed numerous victims. The townspeople, in their desperation, turned to both spiritual and practical means to stop the wolves. Priests conducted blessings and exorcisms in the hope of driving away the evil they believed was behind the attacks. At the same time, local lords and noblemen offered bounties for the heads of the wolves, encouraging hunters and villagers alike to take up arms. The hunts grew more coordinated and intense. Groups of men armed with spears, bows, and traps scoured the forests in search of the wolves. They employed hunting dogs to track the wolves and set up traps in the areas where the animals were most likely to strike. Despite these efforts, the wolves proved difficult to capture, and their attacks continued sporadically, further deepening the sense of terror. As the attacks persisted, stories of the wolves of La Ferté-Bernard spread to neighboring regions, drawing the attention of experienced hunters from farther afield. Some of these hunters were veterans of previous wolf hunts, and they brought with them a greater understanding of wolf behavior and tracking methods. Their involvement, combined with the increasing determination of the local population, finally began to turn the tide in the hunt for the wolves. In one of the final encounters, the hunting parties managed to corner a pack of wolves in a dense thicket not far from the town. After a tense and bloody battle, the hunters succeeded in killing several of the wolves. The bodies of the slain wolves were paraded through the town, a symbolic victory over the terror that had gripped the region for so long. While some believed that the wolves had been destroyed, others feared that more remained, lurking in the forests, waiting for their next opportunity to strike.
The defeat of the wolves brought an end to the immediate threat, but the memory of the wolves of La Ferté-Bernard lingered in the minds of the townspeople for years to come. The events became part of local folklore, with stories of the savage attacks passed down through generations. For the people of La Ferté-Bernard, the wolves were not just animals. They were symbols of the wild and untamed forces that existed just beyond the borders of human civilization. The events also had a broader impact on how wolves were viewed in France and other parts of Europe. The wolves of La Ferté-Bernard became part of a larger narrative of man-eating wolves that haunted the medieval and early modern imagination. As a result, wolves were increasingly hunted and persecuted across Europe, contributing to their eventual near extinction in many regions. However, the story of the wolves of La Ferté-Bernard also speaks to the resilience of the human spirit. Despite the fear and danger, the villagers and hunters persisted in their efforts to protect their community. Their triumph over the wolves, while hard-won, demonstrated the power of cooperation and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. Today, the wolves of La Ferté-Bernard are remembered as a chilling example of the dangers that once lurked in the forests of Europe. The story has become part of the region's rich folklore, a reminder of the fragile balance between humans and nature.
The wolves of La Ferté-Bernard represent one of the darkest chapters in the town's history, a time when the boundary between civilization and the wild blurred, and humans were forced to confront their fear of the natural world. While the terror caused by the wolves was very real, the story also highlights the courage and perseverance of those who faced down the threat. Today, the tale of the wolves of La Ferté-Bernard continues to captivate and remind us of the untamed forces that once roamed Europe's forests and the power of community in overcoming adversity.